distant socially. They're being terrified with fear-mongering about the great disease and we're losing our civil rights, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Don't get me into politics, but that's the way I feel about it sometimes, you know. But anyway, so it was very hard to get used to last time. Did a couple of days. Now, I see Mita was here before. Last time we had more people, but one of the things that happened, I have to choose times of day. In the last course, I was doing it 5 p.m. And about 10 of my closest students there are from Brazil, Uruguay, Mexico. But now there's no way they need to 3 in the morning. Not in Mexico. No, not in Mexico, etc. What? Not working the mic? Not working?
No.
So all that was gone?
No, it's good, it's good, it's good.
They got before?
Yeah.
Okay, that's good.
It was just recent.
Okay, so back to it. So anyway, welcome. I asked to leave it on this time because it's weird enough doing this stuff with this little laptop computer, but I came up to do it in the Gompa, so at least the Gompa's here. And so it was a bit strange what I did a couple of days ago, and I didn't get used to it so easily. So we'll see how it goes today. Okay. So what we're going to do first is give the introduction. It's similar to that I give before. It's similar to the one that I always give. And one of the things that I always say when I start a course, like an intro course, I say, I like to teach with lots of questions and answers. Questions. Not just get up and lecture for an hour or 2 hours. I don't think I could do it almost anyway. But it's the interaction that makes it happen. And so I was a monk for 15 years. And as I said to the group last time, I did 2 1.5-hour philosophy classes a day. I was in this monastery in France. And you have the Geshe, he's got 1 finger on the root text and 1 finger on the commentary, and maybe once in a while an anecdote. And an hour and a half of that, and an hour and a half of that after a French lunch is like, you don't remember anything. But when people ask questions, when they question, wait a minute, Genla, sometimes we had this great Geshe, and when he first went to France to be the abbot, Lama Yeshe asked him, just, why do you need someone as qualified as me? He wasn't being arrogant, to teach a bunch of Westerners. And then afterwards he says, no, I was wrong, because they ask real questions. Sometimes they think Westerners, I mean, they have more education than they maybe studied their logic, and they can answer questions that the Geshe can't quite answer. Excuse me, you can't just say anything to them, you know? So he saw that was a real challenge, because that's what we remember when we question things. So I always like to say, what my first question is always, why are we here? I guess it's, why are we here online? Why are we here? And often I kind of have to transpose to being there's a Gompa full of people that are traveling in India. Well, I'm here because I want to find out something about Buddhism. I'm here because of I want to learn to meditate. I'm here because all these various reasons, etc., etc. And sometimes it even used to be, I'm here because I couldn't find a room in Dharmkot, he says, with his hot chilling in his bag. And so he came to do the course to find a place. So that was, you know, fundamental reason that we do anything is because we want satisfaction, we want happiness, and we don't want suffering. Now, this isn't an advertisement to say what you get here is happiness. You've come to the end of the road. No. Meditation courses, yoga courses, we enter, we get new computers, new relationships. Everything we do, we want something to have some happiness. We hope to get some satisfaction. Everything that we grasp at and wish for, and some can be some very good things, and other things can be just, we realize it's just kind of more possessions or whatever. But so that's what we're doing. We want to get some satisfaction. And that's kind of, I don't want to say divine right, this is Buddhism, but it's our natural state to want to find satisfaction, to move away from dissatisfaction towards satisfaction. And we're looking, we try things out, especially relationships, new cars, new computers, etc., new ideas, new books. But we rarely find the satisfaction we're looking for. And why is that? And this brings us right to the heart of the Buddhist worldview. Because we're looking outside of ourselves. And anything that we're grasping at has they're impermanent. In Buddhism, the definition of impermanent it's quite specific. It means things are changing all the time. Something can last forever and be impermanent. It means it's changing. Synonyms for impermanent are a functioning thing. I have to think some of the other synonyms, but a cause, an effect, that's all means impermanent, changing. So anything we grasp at is going to change. And the more we get attached to it, we're grasping at, the more we suffer when it changes, and it will change. It will change. And then the other aspect, which is one of the most fundamental kind of thing in Buddha Dharma, is that everything is a dependent arising, everything is empty of intrinsic findability. So everything we grasp at, actually we've put the value on it. We've decided the most wonderful thing is chocolate cake. We've decided that this person is so beautiful or this person is so ugly. It's nothing from the side of the object. So that's another thing that happens. And the third, which is a common tenet of Buddhism, is that when we grasp at things with attachment and they change, then there's dukkha, then there's frustration, like that. So, anicca anatta dukkha. If you've ever done one of these meditation courses with something like Goenkaji, he'd walk up, anicca anatta dukkha. You'd be watching inside, you're checking out that everything's changing all the time. That when you look in with your meditation, you see that there's no real self there, and you also start suffering a little bit when your knees start to hurt, etc. You find that this body is a cause of a lot of discomfort, etc. So that's fundamentally why it's so important to bring that. It isn't so much that you don't lose with everything you grasp at, is that that's what decides something is Buddhist or not. If you want to know what makes something Buddhist, it's all compounded phenomena are impermanent. 2, everything is empty. Everything is a dependent arising, empty of intrinsic findability. And 3rd, afflicted minds lead to discomfort, dukkha, and the removal of those afflictions is peace. So those are the 4 seals that make something Buddhist. So it comes out naturally by introducing what we want, and then when we apply those 4 seals, we understand that that's the nature of things. If we understood that, we would know, I grasp at something, it's going to change, you know. We slowly become familiar with that, gradually, and it becomes less. So it's so important to introduce that. And the problem is also we can't change the outside. We cannot change the outside. We know this is what's inside. And another fundamental aspect of Buddha Dharma is everything's coming from inside, the mind. The mind is the source of all happiness and unhappiness. And the root, fundamental tenet of everything is that it's a dependent arising, therefore empty of intrinsic findability. So that means it throws back on ourselves. You're never going to find it outside. You can find some happiness outside to the degree that you are, the degree that you are finding it inside. So it takes us back to our own mind. I had a great Lama, amazing Lama Tushita Yeshe. And of course, everybody thinks their guru is the best, but he was unique in that he understood the different minds of different people. He understood the difference culturally between an Italian, a French, English. Amazing. And he could speak the Dharma to different people, not changing the Dharma, but putting it in their language. That's a real incredible skill to do that, Some people, you teach one thing, they bounce off of it. Okay, so you understand a little bit more how their whole culture deals with things. It's very, very important to really teach people. So he would say, you come to a meditation course, he says it's about the mind and it's about your mind. He says, this course isn't about Buddhism, it's about your mind. It's about your mind and finding out how your mind works and why your mind, happiness and unhappiness is coming from your mind. That's what he would say when we first went there. It's not about something outside, it's about your own mind. That's the purpose that we're here. So, amazing being, Lama Yeshe in that respect. So it throws it back on ourselves, mind. Yeah, so all conscious and conscious experiences, mind, consciousness, very hard at Buddhism. They're kind of, you can use either term. And when this mind, the first mind is referring to the gross consciousness and all of our conceptual thinking, which is the way we generally use mind in our culture, all of the conceptuality, which is the entire spectrum of our internal experience, concepts, emotions, sensory experiences, the unconscious, subconscious, spirit, whatever. All that, it can be subsumed under the mind, and we're still at the level of gross consciousness here, not subtle. And then one thing that's very, very important to understand, which goes very different against our Western worldview, is mind is not the brain. It's not the brain. It has its own continuum, its own substance, so to speak. It's clear and formless knowing. Now, that doesn't mean the mind doesn't interact with the brain. If we take away the brain, we've kind of lost the hardware to play our minds through in a way. But they're not the same thing. And it's not established by science that the mind is the brain. It's an assumption it's made. It's the brain, it's the brain, it's the brain. And they have these mind life conferences, and still with these greatest neurophysiologists, etc., they still can't really agree what mind is. Well, the Buddhists, that's one thing they understand quite well. Even the number of names for mind, if you study Tibetan, it's like different names for different snowflakes. You know? I mean, there's kinds of minds, like there's kinds of different names of so many different aspects, because so many things dealing with mind and trying to describe it. So that's the root. So that's what we're working with, mind, not the brain, not the brain. And we can do that, can be discussed. And it's not the physical brain. It's not physical. The mind doesn't come from outside. It doesn't come from some superior being. It doesn't come from mom and dad. It doesn't come from the sperm and the egg, etc., etc. It has its own continuum. So according to Buddhism, when the sperm and the egg come together, that's the point where there's the mind enters. Without mind there, the sperm and the egg wouldn't create a being. So that's the point of that. Point of conception is really the mind being there. And so, yeah, it's not coming from outside. And we can't blame things outside. Oh, I have my mind screwed up because my mom and my dad, and they screwed me over, and they this, that's all their fault, etc. Yeah, it's we're responsible for our own mind going way back before mom and dad. There's a continuum. And so one of the things there is that because mind is formless and it's not material in the normal sense, it's not made of atoms, so to speak. Every mind doesn't come from God or from mind. It comes from a prior moment of mind, a like prior cause. That's the way it works with the science of mind. Before that, there's another moment of mind. Before that, another moment of mind going back at infinity. There's no beginning. And that's one thing we have trouble with is, well, there's got to be a beginning. But it's an absurdity to have a beginning. That would mean something comes from nothing. So, and if you could say the same thing with all material, it goes back beginninglessly, you know? It doesn't, it morphs in between, you know, it changes, but There's always a moment before. And the great physicist, the French physicist Lavoisier, says nothing is created, nothing is destroyed. Same idea, exactly. Same. Yeah, and so that's where we get that the mind is beginningless. And that's where also comes into some of these things like rebirth. We brought this mind into this body. It came from before. It didn't come from mom and dad. And going back. So it takes birth in different forms. Again and again and again and again and again. Basically, also been scientifically disproven, not at all. But if you can separate mind from brain, you've got it. You've got rebirth right there. But to prove that mind is separate from brain, any
One moment, please. We just lost Jimmy.
I just morphed into a picture of Lama Zopa. That's an improvement, I guess.
Jimmy, we lost you for a moment. You got disconnected. So now we're...
Is the sound still there?
Yeah, the sound is working, but the connection is a little bit sketchy. So we might get...
Oh, okay. So we'll continue with that thought where we worked at. I wasn't sure if everything was cut off. So, as I was saying, it's never been proven that the mind is the brain, and it's difficult for Buddhists or Hindus or whomever to prove that the mind is something separate and continuous, separate from the brain. But it's possible for the yogis, doesn't matter, they're Hindu or Buddhist, whatever. If you can develop one point of concentration, you can see that there's a continuum of mind. You can see that there's this beginningless continuum directly. But that doesn't count scientifically, does it? Because that's subjective. Doesn't count. But sometimes you think, who cares if you're going to prove everything to science? It doesn't matter, you know. There's been plenty of yogis going back, even pre-Buddhism, 3 millennia, who understand what the mind is, and they've seen it directly. You remember in the story of the Buddha that I told last time, maybe I should tell it again, I don't know, because we only have an hour this time. But anyway, when the Buddha was first on, he left the home, he left the palace life, because it was kind of, he wanted to go out and find out the meaning. He wanted to go out and find out how to overcome birth, old age, sickness, and death. That was his job. I'm going to go find out a path that will conquer old age, sickness, death. He says, what's the point of being a king if you can't overcome that one for your family, for your mom, for your dad, for your kingdom? So when he set out looking for different gurus, the first guru that him and his travelers met was a guru who took you in his ashram. He took you up through all of the jhanas. They're called dhyanas in Mahayana, jhanas in Pali. The 4 stages of deep absorption, which are profound states. They're not in themselves spiritual. They're not in themselves leading to awakening, although all the spiritual powers come from one point of concentration. You go through all the different stages of shine, shamatha, and at one point you have access concentration to the first deep state of dhyana. And so Siddhartha, he went right through the 4 form jhanas, boom, 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 because he'd emerged, he renounced. He really renounced. Renunciation is a weird word. This course is called Sutra and Tantra, but the basis of the Sutra and the basis of the Tantra and the Mahayana is that the first is renunciation of samsara, but that doesn't mean renouncing samsara. Renouncing samsara sounds like you got to give up cigarettes, drugs, sex, and rock and roll. That has nothing to do with it. It's emerging from being trapped in that. Emergence is a better word than renunciation. Sounds like, oh, I've got to give up all my good habits that I like and they're bad habits. So not like that. Renouncing samsara, actually what you're renouncing is dukkha. You're actually renouncing pain. And the other 2 are the wisdom of shunyata and the bodhicitta motivation, that you're going to awaken for the benefit of all beings. That's the three principal paths. And so that's that's basically presented in the first 2 days here, and they are all the basis for practicing Tantra. You cannot practice Tantra without having those three. Otherwise, it gets to be a whole nother trip. But anyway, I'm trying to think where I was before. And we'll go back to mind and brain stuff. But anyway, oh yeah, you're going through these different jhanas. And so one of the reasons that you can attain them so quickly, someone like Siddhartha, he had already emerged. He had renounced. He wasn't clinging anymore to this worldly life, even though he was brought up into the best of hedonism. He realized that this is not the way. And so he let go. You could actually attain the deepest spiritual powers, all the spiritual powers, controlling the elements, walking on water, going through walls, reading minds, seeing all the past lives, all come merely from being able to concentrate. They're all and then you have power over the earth. But the thing is that by reading, you have all the power, but you're not from birth and death. You're not. And that's why when people get those powers, they can't be taught anything anymore. They think they know more than they think they know everything. They have all the spiritual. Merely from that concentration allows you to see, going back all your lives. And the story of Siddhartha when he was under the tree, the first night under the tree, the first watch, he already, oh, excuse me, I have to go back. He left that ashram and he said, nope, this doesn't lead me to overcome birth. That's why I came. I came to conquer birth till death. Basically, he had the Bodhisattva vow. He was going until he could free all beings and understand why they're caught. And then the master of the ashram said, please stay. I never had a student like you. You can come over. You can take over. You can be the one to take over this place. He goes, nope, I came here to overcome that. So then they go walking again with his companions, and he goes to the next ashram where they took him into the formless absorptions. There's 4 jhanas, dhyanas of form, and you're going deeper and deeper and deeper until you get to the highest one, which is called the Peak of Samsara. You're still caught in cyclic existence. You still haven't realized Shunyata. You haven't realized. And so by that level, his clairvoyance would have been unbelievable. And I know of a person, a Westerner, I had 3 friends that became monks in the Chinese tradition back in the 60s. And there was another monk there who attained all these powers, and he had the concentration, and he thought he knew more than this abbot who was like one of the greatest yogis ever, as high as it gets. But there's the arrogance, because I can read the minds, I know more than this being, you know. Sometimes people who are fully awakened and free, they don't put their emphasis on reading people's minds, doing the concentrations. Just concentrated enough to be able to be free. So this one guy could do that, and he thought he knew more than the abbot. So sometimes they even discourage you. They discourage you in the Mahayana tradition anyway, or maybe even in the entire Buddhist tradition, I don't know, in the Pali, is to not attain those states without the bodhicitta motivation, or at least without having your deep refuge in the Buddha. You know? Because it's so exalted, it's so blissful, and you have so much wisdom and so much subtlety of body and mind, pliancy of body and mind. It's called Leksu Rungwa in Tibetan. Total serviceability of the mind to do whatever you want with it. Your mind will do anything you want. Through that. And it's exactly, there's nothing Buddhist about it. There's nothing, as I said, Patanjali and the same, everything happens at the same stage. They both discovered this. But it's not enlightenment. It's not freedom. So that's why in the first watch of the night, Siddhartha, he looked back over countless past lives. And he, I'm just flashing on how the video doesn't work. I guess that's not my department. I can see your pictures up there, but I guess nobody's moving. So that arose in him this incredible emergence, looking back at countless past lives, being born and dying, and going through all the vicissitudes of life and the pain and the agony and the sufferings, born again, married again, divorced again, kids again, wars again, born and dying, countless, becoming totally, when you're totally identified with one particular lifetime, it's so important what's happening in that lifetime. My girlfriend, my boyfriend, my marriage, my kids, my this, my da, you know, my social status. But when you see that over countless lifetimes, it just wipes out all that thinking of being identified with that particular situation. And the drama that creates. And so then that was absolute and pure emergence of realization at that point. And that was possible because he had 120 concentration that he learned in that ashram. So science cannot prove for science, the brain is there's no separate from the brain, but they can't prove it. They can't disprove that the mind is something different. But a yogi can look and see. He or she can see it for themselves. Because they have the jhana, the dhyanas. If you ever meet someone who has that. I've met some. I did a Vipassana course, or what they call Vipassana, it's actually Satipatthana in Barre, Massachusetts in 1984. I was a monk in the Buddhist Tibetan tradition, and I went there and I did this retreat. And one of the teachers was this woman called Deepa Ma. She was this simple Burmese woman who had all of the jhanas. Boom. She had all the goods, all the powers of mind. But she was, nevertheless teaching this other. She understood that that's not enough. So humble enough to not get intoxicated with all the spiritual powers. And sticking for wanting to be fully awakened for the benefit of all. So anyway, put some water here. I don't understand why the video doesn't work if we're connected, if you're hearing sound. Felipe?
Yes, Jamila.
Well, the video doesn't work. How does the sound work if the video?
It's very good. Yeah, we can see you and hear you.
Okay, but I can't see or hear the people.
Well, you can see them, yeah.
Okay, well, I don't see my own picture up there, so I didn't know that I'm there.
Yes, you are. Your video is working perfectly.
So do I have to click something so I can see the people and see?
Let me. I'll come down.
Do I have to hit start video again? Okay. Oh, I thought that wasn't happening. I'm going as if it's just talking, not video. Now I can see the people move a little bit. Huh? No.
Oh, there.
I have to click on, it's up there.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you can switch your speaker.
Okay.
Yeah, like that.
Les hautes technologies, c'est difficile pour moi. I'm a Stone Age kid. Okay. So Nangpa, and actually the name. This is very good. Actually, you come to the conclusion by grasping outside, you don't find happiness. It comes from the mind. And the name for a Buddhist in Tibetan language is Nangpa. Nang means inside, an inner person, one who has that belief, one who knows that all unhappiness comes from the mind, one who knows that everything comes from the mind. So that Nangpa is the Tibetan word for Buddhist. In term Buddhism none of the traditions of Buddhism call themselves Buddhism. If you were Buddhism comes from when the British colonized Sri Lanka, or Ceylon back then, and they called all the people who worship the Buddha Buddhists. It comes from them, you know, just like they call the Muslim Muhammadists, you know. But somehow that's what sticks, and we use it. And I think in other languages it can be those who follow the law of reality, the Eightfold Path, whatever. In Tibetan it's Nangpa, so inner beings. And once we realize that happiness or unhappiness only comes from the mind, in our mind, we're responsible for our mind. Wow, incredible. Now we're just engendering that as a hypothesis at our point, aren't we? You know, we haven't realized it yet, but yeah, it's quite. Nobody's disproven that hypothesis yet, so we can take it. There's some hidden phenomena. One hidden phenomena is this, but that's not so hidden that you can't see it with one point of concentration. And then there's the real hidden phenomena. Yeah, some things are hidden. And we will not know it until we're a Buddha like everybody else's past karma, etc. So there's some things we could say we take on faith. And sometimes we scoff at that. I don't want to take anything on faith. I want to be proven everything. Well, this is an extreme wrong view we have. When you study in the monastery, basic Buddhist epistemology, how we know things. There's three ways we can know things. We can know directly, which almost nothing we know directly. Yeah? And then we can know things by a logical inference. Wherever there's combustion, there's fire. Wherever there's smoke, there's fire, etc. But the way we know everything else, and I'm not talking about spiritual things, I'm talking about everything. Geology and geometry and, no, not geometry, the existence of Australia, things like that. We haven't experienced it ourselves. We take it on faith. We take so many things on faith all the time. And then we take certain things, science, on faith, and then the paradigm changes. So it's good to know that, because that puts us a little bit on the line of going towards this, that we don't know this directly or not, but if we go on the side of one side of the other, it comes in that way with rebirth often. I have to see where I am with time here. So anything more about the mind, let me think. Nothing comes from outside of us, no superior being. And then there's three levels of mind. There's gross mind, which is almost completely conceptual. All those things that we mentioned before, all of the entire spectrum of internal experience, emotion, sensory, blah, 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 they're almost all gross mind. Spirit, whatever you want to call it, they're gross mind. But there's a subtler mind. And that subtle mind, the only time we access it is in dreaming, deep sleep, certain things like that. We get a glimpse of it. But in yogic practice, in higher yogic practice, we'll discuss this a little bit when we get the introduction to highest yoga tantra, you start to work with subtler mind through certain pranayama, things like that. Not that we'll be able to demonstrate all that, but we'll give the idea. And in this, so much deep, as a which
Jimmy, we're losing you. Your connection again is going down a little bit.
the sound's not there either. Huh?
Okay, there we go. Now we're back. We're back. It's the connection that
Is
is.
there?
Yeah, it's working now. It's the connection that is going up and down. I'm very sorry.
Okay.
Okay, we got you back now.
Okay, but I still, what do I have to click on to get me on instead of Lama Zopa in the middle?
You go to the top right corner where it says gallery view.
It says what? Gallery review?
Yeah, gallery view.
Gallery view? Okay, then I can click on me. Okay. Oh, I don't have to click me big. It just have to be there. That's all. Huh?
Yeah. Do you have the pictures of everyone now?
Yeah, I have a picture of everyone now, and I'm in the middle top.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. To decide where to go from here, we have about 15 minutes, and there was a whole lot of stuff to cover. A few more of those things of the subtle mind, gross and subtlest mind. And then there's Buddha nature, Buddha nature. We all have, our fundamental reality is a pure mind, pure mind. I mentioned it in the couple of days I did before, that we have what's called Buddha nature. There's part of us that's pure. It's been pure from the beginning. Doesn't mean it's Buddha from the beginning, but it's pure. It's the basis for awakening. And no one could become awakened if...
Jimmy, we just lost you from the microphone. Can you move the mic, please? But I'll come down. No, from the other part.
You plug it in different places.
No.
Is that working? Okay, so that's our fundamental nature. Remember in the last course, and I'll bring it up again when it gets to precious human rebirth. Precious human rebirth, realizing that and realizing that we have Buddha nature, is like we could never be depressed, as Holiness said in a small group that when I went down with the Tushita group once. Our fundamental nature is pure. And if it wasn't pure, nobody could be awakened. If the delusions and the afflictions were mixed inseparably from the pure nature of the mind, then nobody could become awakened. And so one of the most beautiful examples of this is the little things that you used to get at Christmas, and you'd shake and the snow would all settle. And it was a perfect metaphor for meditation. It's like you shake and then it all settles down and becomes, and then you just see the pure water. But even from the point of view of the chemistry, water is H2O. If you have a glass of muddy water, it's always H2O, no matter how muddy the water gets. So by letting the mud settle, you've got pure mind. It's the same thing for meditation. Our fundamental nature is pure. It's just a matter of letting things settle deep enough until we've reconnected. And then at that point, we realize that all the afflictions, all the delusions, the disturbing emotions are just like clouds in the sky, like storms on the ocean. But that can take a long time to get to that point because we believe in all this stuff so deeply. We believe in all of it so deeply. So those are pretty much different things in mind. Emotions are conceptual, yeah. So not until you get to the subtler minds are you getting to really perception itself. I'll just mention one other thing, collective consciousness. Collective consciousness is not really, in a way, there's no such thing as collective consciousness from the point of view that we're all experiencing the same things. You don't experience my bad karma, my sensitivities. But there is collective consciousness in the group, the past life from as a continuum of mind. They're not merged with everybody else's. You could say if you get fully enlightened and you're omniscient and you're perceiving all phenomena simultaneously, you'd be one mixed with another Buddha. You'd still have a separate continuum prior to that. But other than that, so collective consciousness, the idea is useful in the sense if we all create something, like if we all kill someone together, do something positive together, do some wonderful act, in our next lives, according to the karma, we will accrue something. We will all experience something similar, but each individual in that group is going to experience it individually according to their past life karma. So let me see now, time minute. So I wanted to mention again. Well, I mean, again, we still haven't done it with this group. The people are new. So we understand now that what makes something dharma is all compounded phenomena impermanence. Everything is not intrinsically findable. It's empty from existing from its own side. Shunyata, that all afflicted minds lead to suffering. Anger, a mind of anger and extreme attachment cause dukkha, cause discomfort. And the removal of those afflictions is nirvana bliss. So those are the four seals that make something Buddhist or not. And then the fact that everything is based on the mind. But what are, so that's Buddha Dharma. But there's these things called the worldly dharmas. There's 8 worldly dharmas. Loss and pain, pleasure and pain. Loss and gain, pleasure and pain. Praise and blame, euphony, defamation. They're called the 8 worldly dharmas. Because we're always trying to secure them. We want gain, we don't want loss. We want pleasure, we don't want pain. We want pleasant words and praise, and we don't want blame. And we want to have a good reputation, and we don't want to have a bad reputation, euphony, and defamation. So our lives are caught up very deeply with these, and they're called the worldly dharmas. They're worldly by nature. And what comes from this again is fear. With fear that I won't get what I want, fear that I'll lose what I've got, etc., etc. I'll get what I don't want. So fear runs throughout these worldly dharmas. So that's what worldly dharmas are, and we have to gradually let them go, lessen them and lessen them and lessen them more and more. It's ironic that by not grasping after pleasure, I didn't read the Heart Sutra yet, did I?
No, I don't think you did.
Oh, okay, because well, maybe I should still read that before the end, and then I do it at the beginning of every teaching because some of its understanding is based on that. Yeah, I'm going to read the Heart Sutra. The Heart Sutra. Where's my copy? Oh, here it is. There's this corpus of literature in Buddhism called the Prajnaparamita literature, the wisdom, the transcendent wisdom. And there's the Prajnaparamita literature in 100,000 slokas or verses. There's the Prajnaparamita Sutra in 25,000 slokas or verses. And there's the Prajnaparamita in 8,000 slokas or verses. And there's the Prajnaparamita in 9 slokas. 8. So naturally, it's a bit terse, you know? And so you have to read between the lines, and they study this, they debate it. It's about shunyata, it's about emptiness. It's the essence of it. That's why they call it the heart of wisdom. The Holy Sutra of the heart of perfection of wisdom. Arya Bhagavati Prajnaparamita Hridya Sutram. Homage to the holy perfection of wisdom. Thus I have heard at one time the Lord was staying at Rajgir on Vulture Peak Mountain together with a great host of monks and a great host of bodhisattvas. At that time the Lord was composed in the concentration on the course of dharmas called profound illumination. At that time also the noble Lord Avalokita, the Bodhisattva and Mahasattva, in the practice of the profound perfection of wisdom, looked down. He beheld but 5 skandhas, and that in their own being they were empty. Then through the inspiration of the Buddha, the elder Shariputra, said to the noble Lord Avalokita, the Bodhisattva and Mahasattva, how should any son of a good family train who wishes to engage in the profound perfection of wisdom? And the noble Lord Avalokita, the Bodhisattva and Mahasattva, spoke to the elder Shariputra as follows. Shariputra, any son or daughter of a good family who wishes to engage in the profound perfection of wisdom should look upon it thus. He or she beholds the 5 skandhas, and that in their own being are empty. Form is emptiness, emptiness is form, emptiness does not differ from form, and form does not differ from emptiness. Likewise, feelings, recognition, volitions, and consciousnesses are empty. So, Shariputra, all dharmas are emptiness. Dharma here means phenomena. All phenomena are empty. Lacking differentiating marks. They are not produced or stopped, not defiled and not immaculate, not deficient and not complete. Therefore, Shariputra, in emptiness there is no form, no feeling, no consciousness, no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no visible form, no sound, no smell, no taste, no tangible, no mental object, no I element, etc., up to no mind element and no mental consciousness element. No ignorance and no extinction of ignorance, etc., up to no aging and death. Likewise, there is no suffering, origin, cessation, or path, no wisdom, knowledge, no attainment, and no non-attainment. So basically, all of the things of the Buddhist path we're saying no, no, no. And very clearly, it doesn't mean no, they don't exist. It means they don't exist independently. Everything is empty. When we say everything is empty, empty of what? Empty of a separate self. And empty of independent existence. Why? Because everything exists as a relativity, a dependent arising. So when they're going through all of these sacred points of Buddha Dharma, even them, including the Buddha Dharma Sangha, everything is empty of intrinsic findability. Everything exists relatively and functions as a relativity. It's very important. This is the main thing of understanding emptiness. Empty of what? Empty of independent self, and empty of intrinsic self. Everything. Nothing exists that's independent. Nothing, nothing, nothing. To say something is independent is to say it's non-existent. Because everything that exists is dependent on dependent on what? Dependent on causes and conditions, depending on its parts, depending on causes and conditions, depending on somebody knowing it, depending on us knowing it, and dependent on it being labeled, being named at a very subtle level. So they've gone through all the parts of Buddhism, and they don't self-exist. People tend to think there's certain things that are self-existent, like God, etc. No, no, no. The Buddha isn't self-existent. It's also a dependent arising. Doesn't mean he's not awake. There is no attainment, bodhisattva. No attainment and no non-attainment. Therefore, Shariputra, because there is no attainment, bodhisattvas abide relying on the perfection of wisdom without obscuration of thought, and so are unafraid. Transcending perverted views, they attain in the end nirvana. All Buddhas existing in the 3 times, relying on the perfection of wisdom, fully awakened to the highest perfect enlightenment. Therefore, one should know that the mantra of the Prajnaparamita is the mantra of great knowledge. The highest mantra, the unequaled mantra, the mantra which allays all suffering, the truth since it has nothing wrong. The mantra of the Prajnaparamita is proclaimed. Have a drink here. Tayata. Tayata gate gate, paragate, parasamgate, bodhisvaha. Let's all say it. Gate gate, paragate, parasamgate, bodhisvaha. Gate gate, paragate, parasamgate, bodhisvaha. Gate gate, paragate, parasamgate, bodhisvaha. In this way, Shariputra should a bodhisattva and a mahasattva train in the profound perfection of wisdom. Then the Lord rose from the concentration and commended the noble Lord Avalokita, the bodhisattva and mahasattva, saying, well done, O son of a good family. So it is, O son of a good family, so it is. Just as you have taught, should the profound perfection of wisdom be practiced, and all the Tathagatas will rejoice. When the Lord had uttered this, the elder Shariputra, the noble Lord Avalokita, the bodhisattva and mahasattva, and all the people present, including the devas, human beings, the asuras, and gandharvas, were delighted and applauded the Lord's speech. So the main topic there is shunyata, emptiness, the prajnaparamita, the wisdom. As I mentioned before, this sutra was not spoken by the Buddha, but he goes into his meditation and he speaks to Shariputra and Avalokiteshvara. Shariputra represents the senior monk, foremost of the wise in the monastery, the senior monk, and that the individual vehicle he represents. And Avalokiteshvara represents everyone, all beings, the universal vehicle. And so it's set up, the Buddha ensheathes these questions to be asked. Any son of Vedanta who wishes to engage in the profound perfection of wisdom should look upon it thus. He or she beholds the five skandhas and that in their own being are empty. The Buddha divided this into 5 parts. He divided this into form, which is the body, and the mind. And the other 4 skandhas are the mind. There's two facets to mind. There's primary consciousnesses and there's mental factors. So the primary consciousnesses, it's the 5th skandha, are the hearing, seeing, smelling, touching, the 5 sense consciousnesses and gross mental consciousness. And the 51 mental factors are factors that rise and fall in the mind. We work with them all the time. There's positive mental factors like love, compassion, sympathetic joy. There's negative ones like attachment, anger, jealousy, pride, etc. And so the Buddha gave a separate skandha to perception, separate skandha to feeling, and a separate skandha to feeling or discrimination, to perception or discrimination. Because something appears to us, it appears as if it's truly existent. We haven't realized that everything is a dependent arising. Everything that appears to us appears to be existing from its own side, independent. Everything. And so then when something appears to us, we think it's independently, we get a good feeling about it or a bad feeling. It's independently good or independently bad or independently neutral. And then that's a whole mental factor of feeling. Feeling just decides if things are good, bad, or indifferent. And then perceptions, discrimination say, I want the good, I don't want the bad, I don't care about the neutral. So he gave a separate skandha, the Buddha, to each of these 2 and lumped all the other 51 mental factors, 49 other mental factors, in something called relational formations, because these were so important. As we go through life, something appears, we right away we're going, this is good, this is bad, this is indifferent, I want this, I don't want that. These are the driving forces. And that there's nothing to grasp at. What we are is just 5 skandhas, and that translates as heaps. Aggregates is a horrible translation. Heaps, like we're a pile of sand. The consciousness is all the different consciousnesses, pile of dust, pile of sand. All of the feelings, perceptions, relational formations, consciousness. So, but fundamentally, he's showing there's nothing much to grab. And if we looked with insight, even in our own body, which we get so attached to, we can do this in a 10-day Vipassana course. We can look and see that everything's changing all the time. It's always in flux. There's nothing to grab there as being concrete, independent. Okay. So it's about shunyata. And who's there from Mita? What's the last name? Mita? You were there before. You were there in the last course and sent me a question about emptiness. And so the first things we have to really get straight is that when we say something's empty, we have to ask empty of what? And empty of independent self. That's what it means. And it's the same thing with saying that everything is dependent. Everything is empty of being independent because everything is dependent. So dependent arising and emptiness are exactly the same meaning, yeah? Does that make sense? Empty of an independent self. So everything that exists is dependent. To say something is independent is a non-existent. It doesn't exist. You can't find one thing in the universe that's independent. It's not dependent on its parts, causes, and conditions. Somebody knowing it, etc. But we get lost with the term because it sounds so nihilistic, this no, this emptiness. Yet emptiness means dependent arising. It means everything, so it's so full, isn't it? Everything is a dependent arising. Everything is a relativity. From that comes that we're related to every other being in the universe, including Mother Earth, etc., etc. The relativity is fantastic, but it means it's empty of being independent. So we might ask, and this will be repeated again and again and again, it needs to be, why don't they just say everything's a dependent arising and say everything's empty? Empty is so weird, it sounds so nihilistic, so dark, yeah? That's because when a yogi is looking at the self, he goes into the self and realizes that this self, this I, there's nothing independent. It's empty of being independent. What I grasp on as I or me is a dependent arising. And sees it's empty. And the emptiness of the self, which means it's a dependent arising. So in terms of meditative practice, one would go in and find the emptiness. And then when one comes out of that deep meditative equipoise, say this is the point you got the realization, you realize shunyata, now you're free from cyclic existence. When you come out, everything appears again, but it appears as a relativity. You know you're not fooled by it anymore. You understand. This question, it's on my phone, but that should take care of quite a bit of it. One of the questions is just, how is it relevant in the daily life? It is daily life. Everything is a dependent arising. Nothing exists. Daily life, non-daily life. It's all relativity. That's all there is. You can check this for yourself. One of the things, the most profound point of Buddha Dharma, that everything is empty of being independent because it's a relativity, is very easily to prove with a simple syllogism. It's not so deep in that sense. The most profound isn't hidden. Karma and rebirth are a bit hidden. Rebirth is hidden to only people who don't have one point of concentration. And karma, in its full aspect, can only be seen by a fully awakened Buddha. That by doing this, I'll get that result. So, okay, we're going to have to go, we'll go to question and answer now and try to clarify.
Yeah, there's already 3 people with questions, Jimmy, so I'll start with Kamini. So actually, Kamini has a bunch of questions, but let's start with one.
Which one's Mini again?
Kamini, Jimmy.
Kamini. Okay.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi, Jimmy.
Hi.
Thank you for such a wonderful class. I have 100 questions after that, but I'll go one by one.
Well, that's good. Not that we can answer them all today, but over time we will.
Of course. Thank you so much for that. I'm actually here. I started learning about Buddhism because after I was diagnosed with a psychiatric disorder, and my doctor recommended Tantra practice could help work out. I wanted to understand if you're saying the mind is separate from the brain, then how does the explanation about a psychiatric disorder fit into it? I mean,
Okay, no. This is the point. The point was kind of made, but maybe it was glossed over. The mind has its own continuum, and the brain has its continuum. And the mind's continuum is a formless entity, but it's without a brain, it can't act. It's like I don't know if this holds up, but it's like the software and the hardware. Without the hardware, without the brain, the software can't run. You know, it can't. So that they're very connected. But at the level of subtler and subtler mind, they're not as connected. At the level of subtle mind, which is maybe some of the things that we're coming to with the help you got it with the Tantra, Tantra is mostly dealing with subtle mind and not gross mind, not philosophy, not logic. And at that level, the subtle mind is inseparable from the prana. The prana is the form. At the gross level, you have the brain and the mind, the gross mind. At the subtler level, you have, and this is where the last two days of the tantric part will come up. So we're not saying that the mind doesn't have anything to do with the brain, but it's a separate continuum. If you take out the brain, the mind will continue, according to Buddha Dharma. The body, guys, the brain is material and it will stop, it will cease. But while you're alive, there's all sorts of things that are going to be connected with that, you know? Obviously, you take certain drugs and it affects your mind, not just your brain. Okay.
So we can then go to Alstelias with this question.
Yeah, I want to go back to, I was talking to Kamini and asked her if that helped.
Oh, okay. So let me go back.
Wasn't it Kamini?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hello.
Hi. Yeah, I got a bit of what you're saying, but maybe later when we have the time, I'd like to discuss it further with you.
Yeah, it's something that has to be discussed. It's not going to happen right away. So the brain and the mind are obviously connected. In fact, the mind is connected with everything, the table, everything's interdependent. But at the gross level of mind and the five sense consciousness and gross mental consciousness, it has to function on the brain. That's the hardware. But the mind itself is a different substance. It has its own like cause. And when the brain dies, the mind goes on. The mind continues, but it's a much subtler mind that continues. And we get to subtler levels of consciousness. The only times that we get to the subtle mind very often is in dreaming. And that's why some of the deeper tantric practices are doing with dream yoga, etc., etc. Or you can get to subtler level of consciousness with particular pranayama yogic practices where the entire gross mind is cut, the five sense consciousness. You're dealing at a subtler level and then there's a subtlest. But definitely, when there's certain psychological disorders that aren't just chemical, not just brain chemical, we try manipulating the prana, the tantra, by doing certain kinds of vase breathing, etc., we can start to alleviate that. It sounds a little bit what may have occurred with your doctor. It'd be good to talk about. This is really a good topic, important. But the other, what's his name's question about, it was asking, just clear about the simple statement that everything is empty. Empty of what? Empty of being independent. It's a dependent arising. Everything that exists is a dependent arising. Otherwise, it can't exist. It'd be absurd. If there were no causes and conditions, no parts, no mind knowing, no mind knowing it, no, not labeling coming into existence by saying this is this, you don't have anything. When the Heart Sutra goes, no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no everything that goes to all those categories, he means no independent. Of course, there's eye, there's ear, there's nose, no tongue, there's body. But they're relativity. They're dependent arising. I can't see where we are right now. Am I being heard or whatever? Are we going to continue with other questions, or?
Yeah, we have other questions, Jimmy. We have 3 more people asking questions.
Okay, good. So we can do that.
Okay, so I'll go to Austejas then.
Who?
Austejas.
Hi. Yeah, I remember you from last time. Yeah.
What is the difference between Nirvana and enlightenment?
Okay, Nirvana is realizing shunyata, realizing the emptiness of all phenomena, including you, including the I, and by doing that, you're liberated from samsara. You're free from birth and death, right? Okay? But then when you combine that realization of shunyata with the altruistic motivation that I'm going to awaken for the benefit of all beings, I'm not just checking out, you know. So you're both completely free from samsara. You both perfectly recognized that everything is dependent arising, that everything's empty. There's no separate self. And you become an arhat. So you abide in this non-conditional state. But it's really hard to describe because it's kind of beyond us in a sense. But if you combine the altruistic promise or wish, the vow to enlighten all beings, along with that realization of shunyata, that's full enlightenment. And a Buddha, even in the Pali Sutras, was more realized than the arhats. He had more going on because it took him many lifetimes of working for others combined with that realization of shunyata. This vast accumulation of spiritual momentum. So they're different. A Buddha is a higher being than an arhat. They're both completely free from samsara. But a Buddha, because of that motivation, they can emanate, it's another level.
So samsara, so enlightenment and nirvana is not the same.
Nirvana is freedom from samsara, enlightenment is freedom from samsara, combined, becoming fully awakened Buddha. It's a higher awakening. But they're both free from cyclic existence, both free.
Ah.
And as I said last time on the last group, when you were there, samsara at the most gross level is, being born in a god, as a ghost, as a hell, that are going around in circles through these different births. That's gross samsara. But the deeper meaning of samsara are these 5 skandhas, under the power of delusion and karma. That's really what samsara is, So you remove delusion and karma, the root when you recognize the root delusion, which is realized by realizing shunyata. This is what we're going to go into a lot tomorrow when we go to the Four Noble Truths. But at that point, that part will be explained. So yes, it's a higher enlightenment, but you're both equally free.
Thank you.
But yeah, whereas a Buddha or a Bodhisattva would come back into the world and help others, but he's not suffering. They're both free from suffering. They chose to the power of their wish, the power of their vow, to come back and benefit all beings. Like that. Whereas nirvana, they're kind of in this nirvana state. They've cut the volition factor of the mind that says, I'm going to go here, I'm going to go there, I'm doing this, I'm doing that.
And arhat is more who works for himself.
If an arhat is more what?
Arhat is person who works for himself more.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes. It doesn't mean an arhat when he's in the form before he dies isn't helping others. All the time they'd be helping others. But at that point, yeah, he's attained this undescribable samadhi of being free from samsara. But the volitional, because the I that is shown to have never have existed is completely cut. It's just but that includes the volitional factor of the mind. You decide, I'm going to go here, I'm going to go here, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. That's gone. You're just abiding in the samadhi. But in the case of a bodhisattva, they've replaced that with the vow. I'm going to save every being. I'm going to save this being, this being, this being. That becomes the volitional factor of the mind. Buddhists and enlightened, fully enlightened beings don't decide I'm going to come down to India right now and save that person, end that riot, whatever. No, depending on dependent arising connections, they will manifest. It's a deep topic, but anyway, there's a difference there. But it's not putting down the arhats. Boy, you're free. Done. But what about all the other beings? Okay, next question.
Yeah, we have Payel.
Payan?
Payel.
Payel.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi, Jimmy.
Hi.
So my question is, how does realizing emptiness may lead to or leads to nirvana?
Okay. Well, what keeps us in samsara, and I'm talking about not, of course that means going around in the different realms, but the subtler meaning is this body mind, Jimi under the power of delusion and karma. Okay? So the way to be free of delusion and karma, the only way, all delusion and karma comes from ignorance that believes that we're independent, not dependent arising. Okay? Slowly with that. So everything that exists as dependent arising is empty of being separate completely, including us, including all phenomena. But we don't realize that because it means they said this to me, it comes up very strongly. And when that I comes up, it's not even the true self. So when one realizes the Prajnaparamita, the Heart Sutra, the wisdom that realizes that the I that I grasp onto and fight for and feed and worry about and all this stuff, that I never ever existed. But there's a relative I that does. There's a relative I that does. Of course we're not non-existent. But we don't believe in a relative I, we believe in concrete. And when something, we have to observe this over time, you know? Like when some emergency happens to us, some really heavy thing. The I comes up like, I lost my wallet, I lost my passport, they said that to me. It comes up very strong. That I that comes up strong is just non-existent. It's just a nonsense. It's an emotion based on a nothing. The real you is just this 5 skandhas going along in flow, the river of each skandha. Thich Nhat Hanh says there's the river of the form, which is constantly changing. You do your insight meditation. We're just a river of changing sensations, etc. There's the river of changing feelings, changing perceptions, and all the other, and a river of all the different things going on. There'd be no reason to get uptight about anything. We'd be free. But it's when we believe in this concrete I, but we have to overcome the ignorance that things exist independently. And it's not the ignorance of not knowing, it's the ignorance of misknowing reality. The ignorance is the root of samsara. You uproot the ignorance through the wisdom of understanding shunyata, dependent arising. You uproot that ignorance and then you're free. Because there's nothing to grasp onto. There never was. Life goes on. We can still have. What's very interesting is when we realize that the afflictions, anger, attachment, jealousy, pride, these things can't function anymore. All the things that cause us dukkha. Tomorrow we'll do Four Noble Truths, and the dukkha, it doesn't mean just suffering. It means dis-ease, uncomfort. All that's gone when we uproot the ignorance. The whole job is to uproot that ignorance. And it can take lifetimes of developing enough spiritual momentum or merit or whatever you want to call it for a better term to uproot that, and then you're free. But as I was saying, you don't want to just be free. In Mahayana Buddhism, you want to come back and help all your beings. You vow that you'll come back for all beings. Because when you realize that emptiness without the bodhicitta wish, the volition, the part of the mind that says, I'm going to go here, I'm going to go there, has been cut. You just rest in that state. But that's replaced by the bodhisattva vow. that make any sense? It's something to, it takes time to grasp that, but it's kind of a general idea. So you realize the emptiness of the self that never existed. You realize that the I that you're grasping on never existed. There's a relative self that does exist, sure. That's the one that's a dependent arising. It's dependent on others, it's dependent on parts. That one doesn't get angry. What's the point? It's just, we just go with it, it's just flowing along. It's this me, I, other, me, I, other. That's how the problem comes from that. And tomorrow
So I guess I have a follow-up thought on this.
Okay.
Yeah. So when the mind is not on any volition, then where does it go? Like for the arhats maybe, or the Buddhas later on.
Oh, the arhat's still a sentient being. They still have mind. I think they still have a mind. It's just that factor of the mind. There's mind. There's primary consciousness. There's mental factors. So one of them is volition, and also volition. We need to have that factor. There's one thing that's very interesting, because all the gurus that I know, all my teachers in the tradition of, do you know anything about psychology? So in the tradition of Buddhism, they all don't understand what ego means, the lamas. They say we're going to get rid of our ego. No, we're not going to get rid of our ego. Ego is the part of the consciousness that knows what I refers to, I went to this conference with all the psychologists and scientists at Amherst College once, a long time ago, and this topic came up. And it's like, Buddhists have an ego, they have a Vajra ego. See, they mix up, the Tibetans mix up the term ego for rangzin, grasping, false grasping in itself, grasping of the I that didn't exist. Ego is a psychological term that some part of us has to know what I refers to, volition. And Bob Thurman made a joke. He said, we wouldn't want all our Buddhas and Bodhisattvas sitting there and peeing their robes because they didn't know that I have to go to the bathroom. And that's what it would come to if the Buddha didn't have an ego. And unfortunately, a lot of psychologists and psychiatrists, this misusing of the term, their sons and daughters going off to lose their egos, and they go, no, this came up at this conference. No, we don't want our kids to lose their ego. I've got a whole ward full of people who lost their ego. They don't know who they are. They think they're Napoleon. They think they're this. They think they're that, So it's a wrong understanding of the term, but it's been starting to mean egoism. Wrongs in grasping at an I that never existed. When that's uprooted, you're free. But you would still have a mind and at that point also for an arhat, the volitional factor wouldn't be there either. They'd be disembodied. They wouldn't be having to go to the bathroom.
Thank you, Jimmy. Thanks.
Okay, but it's a mind-blowing thing what a bodhisattva is, And why sometimes they sound like they're putting down the arhat path. They're not. It's inconceivable. But they don't want anybody to realize emptiness until they've generated the wish to enlighten all beings. Then you'll come back and enlighten the people you promised to enlighten. And they don't suffer. I believe the Dalai Lama he's free from samsara. I believe he's free from samsara. He's not free from maybe having power over his body completely, although they all say he does, but he says, no, I didn't. But anyway, he doesn't suffer behind it. So, horrible things can happen, as has happened to the Dalai Lama. He lost his country, all these people. And he's sad, he has the emotion that but he isn't brought down by it totally. He still keeps his spirit, a bodhicitta. Joy.
Finally, we have one question from Stephanie.
Okay, Stephanie.
Hi, Jimmy.
Okay. Hi.
I have gratitude for you in doing this, so thank you for that first. And I have a question on emptiness and if there's any cues of progress to have the realization. Is it a gradual progress or?
Well, this is a tough question, actually. It's gradual and it's instantaneous. When you realize it, pop, you've done it, But working up towards it means you take things everything that appears, you take it less and less seriously. Everything that appears as if it's existing from its own side.
Yeah.
Yeah? And
Sorry.
even, okay.
Sorry, I need to give you a background.
Okay.
The first time that the 3 days before I listened to, emptiness and the meditation and the practice of it, I had a dream where I saw the nature of it all, and it was, a lucid dream. Then I woke up and I saw
Good.
from the core how everything will exist in this kind of world. But it was an instant where I woke up and I'm like, oh, I see.
When you woke up, did you see everything was like an illusion? Nothing to grasp anymore? Okay.
Yeah.
That's it, So that means the more you get to that, and you get closer. When you're dreaming, you have a subtler mind than the one that's out there in the debate courtyard, logical. It's a much subtler mind. It's a subtle mind which can realize this more easily or get closer to it. So when you don't take yourself as seriously or other phenomena seriously, you don't have a fear when things come up and appear to you, you see them as being illusion-like. It's very important that it's illusion-like, not an illusion.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very important point, because if you see everybody's suffering as an illusion, no, but it's illusion-like, because those people are suffering pain. They're not realized, whatever. But so things get less and less concrete. If you lose something, you don't cry as much. If something, you don't take yourself as seriously, the appearance of things, the loss of things you kind of go with it more easily. And there's a lot more spaciousness in your mind. So you had this experience in a dream, and gradually you can try to cultivate until you get to that in your awakened state. But still, the point where you realize shunyata is you're going to know it, Like they say, you're going to get up and dance. The Lama says, you'll know you're enlightened. You'll know, boom. It's not going to be some secret thing. And but that's really good. That's a good sign you're getting it, and that's capable in a dream, because it's a subtler mind in a dream. In the Tantras, we won't be able to talk about this in the introduction to Tantra, but one of the Tantras is, sleep yoga, dream yoga, because it's a subtler mind. The other way you get a subtler mind is by bringing so where you eliminate the gross sense consciousnesses, and you're in the central channel dealing with subtle consciousness, which happens when you dream, happens when you faint, happens when you go to sleep. You're a much subtler being. And the 5 sense consciousness are, they're cut, but you're at that subtle level. No, it's a sign when you're not going to get too worried about things anymore. Like that. It doesn't mean you're not worried about sentient beings and wanting to take care of their suffering and take care of ecology and the world's suffering. You yourself, it doesn't break you when these things happen. There's these great beings who were imprisoned. One great being I met, Rebirth Rinpoche, he was basically chained to the wall in a Chinese prison and tortured for 20 years. And his biggest fear was that he would lose his love and bodhicitta for his torturers. This is somebody who's made it there, He thought, oh, no, I don't want to get to the point where I'm in here. I hate these people, because I vowed to save them all, That's someone who's kind of really lessened it a lot. And it'll happen in your life too. You see different people. We cultivate, our whole path is cultivating love and compassion and the positive emotions and lessening the negative ones. And they don't appear, the negative ones need to have that wrong view of ignorance to rise. And positive ones don't, interestingly enough. But before they've completely been uprooted, they can become lessened, and you'll be closer to where you can realize shunyata. They say it takes a lot of merit or spiritual momentum, a lot of practice. But at the point of practicing that, Stephanie, it's like you don't care anymore. You know you're on the right path. I'm not worried about when I'm going to get to this particular point. But when you get to that point, you do pop it. It's this illusion that there's quick liberation and gradual. They say that the Zen is instantaneous, but you have to do all the work to get to the point where it happens quick. There's no difference in a way. You practice, you open your heart, you do positive, positive, positive. At one point you realize emptiness. Believe me, I haven't done this. I'm just going from people who have described it. And so there really isn't a sudden enlightenment. You did your work somehow. The Buddha, Shakyamuni Buddha, in his past life, he was 3 countless eons, billions of lives gaining this spiritual momentum. Where it said that he could have been an arhat in 8 lifetimes, 7 lifetimes. But he did all of this, feeding himself to the tigress, all these bodhisattva actions. But he wasn't suffering anymore. He already realized shunyata at some point, depending on his level. Does that help?
Absolutely. That was my question. Like, it's like I've never heard of this before. In 3 days before I heard about emptiness, that's when I had the realization.
Okay.
So
Well,
for me, it was a bit like, oh, they're saying it's this and that, but
okay. Well, we'll continue with this tomorrow. And also today, there's a special circumstance we didn't have last time. Venerable Droma starts her class at 5 o'clock, and Felipe's he says, you got to cut it at the time today. From my point of view, and I think on the last 2 days, if he's willing to stick around, we can continue on, and it feels more natural to continue on with the questions and stuff after the time, and are just even getting to know each other. It's incredible to be able to meet all these brothers and sisters on the path. But anyway, we'll continue tomorrow, and for sure, absolutely, you'll have email. Well, we can connect anytime. We can discuss these things. Where do you live? South America? I can't hear you. You've been cut off, I think.
I'm in New York City.
Okay, but you come from South America or somewhere?
Yes, I'm Colombian.
Colombian. Okay, good. I know I have a few Dharma brothers and sisters that are Colombian now. All sisters, actually. One guy. Yeah. Okay. So we do a dedication. Any virtue we may have accumulated by discussing the Dharma, reflecting on the Dharma, may as it serve as a cause for our awakening. Because only when we are awake or more awake will we be effective in benefiting all beings, or more effective in benefiting all beings, including ourselves. All beings includes ourselves. So we dedicate any virtue, anything that came up positive towards all beings and our own enlightenment, as opposed to having some moment of pleasure in the future. I'll explain that process. It's very important to motivate and dedicate. So thank you everybody for your patience, and we'll continue tomorrow. I hope you'll be there tomorrow. Didn't drive you away. Great. So, hasta mañana.
Thank you so much, Jamila. Thank you.
Bye bye.